completely deficient, grotesque, in fact, forms of life. And so we have this question about renewal. Is it possible? Or are we going to literally just go up in smoke? Can Christian society be renewed? You know, if you are a careful student of Holy Scripture, you'll know that in the Old Testament, during the period of the judges and also during the period of the kings, society was prospering when it had incredible leadership of holy judges, great judges.
Started this policy of crisis. It was Suez crisis, it was Berlin crisis, and it is going higher, higher and higher until it's ended with a Cuban Missile Crisis.
The general Nikita Khrushchev reveals his dangerous side.
When mingled with the Soviet people, I mean, that was never happening. That was an incredibly liberal moment. All the great theater of Russia came out during the thaw because suddenly there was this variety of ideas that you could exercise. The film had a remarkable renaissance at the time because suddenly people could speak. There was incredible attempts to decentralize the communist monolith in every area.
They come in every color, creed, and cause, but beneath the polished speeches and campaign smiles, some politicians are nothing more than wolves in suits. While the public grows increasingly skeptical, a few still manage to slip through the cracks, masking their agendas, rallying zealots, and surrounding themselves with blind followers. This is the story of one such figure, a politician who should have never gotten close to power, let alone held it.
Waiting orders.
Who is Kamala Harris? What is her background? What was her ideological outlook? Why were many of her actions controversial, if not criminal? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, college professor, Army Marine Corps veteran, and welcome to this episode of
Building.
Conscript reporting. Moving out.
Unit.
Waiting orders.
Unit.
Waiting orders. Moving out. Comrade. For the Union. Comrade.
Unit. Ready.
Tools ready. Moving.
Construction complete.
Kamala Harris was born October 20th, 1964 in Oakland,
Yes,
California, to immigrant
Building.
parents. Her father was an openly Marxist economics professor at Stanford University, and both parents were active supporters of the Afro-American Association, which
Building.
openly supported Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, and see our video on Che Guevara. Kamala and her sister Maya were both communist activists on campus and were connected to communist Steve Phillips,
Moving.
leader of the pro-communist Chinese League of Revolutionary Struggle at Stanford. Phillips married into the Sandler family, owners of Golden West Savings and Loan. They fund left-wing candidates.
Building.
Harris graduated from Howard University and the University of California Hastings College of Law and was recruited to the San Francisco District Attorney's Office in Alameda, California.
Engineering.
After graduating from college, Harris became the mistress of the then 60-year-old married Speaker of the California Assembly, Willie Brown Jr., who was supported by communists such as Dr. Carlton Goodley, who owned the Sun Reporter and a few other pro-communist newspapers. When Brown was elected mayor of San Francisco, he brought Harris with him, as he endorsed her Marxist philosophy and mentored her as she rose in California politics.
Building.
Brown and the Democrat communist helped Harris become the DA of San Francisco in 2003,
Tools ready.
but
Yes,
several
Commander.
questionable
Need a ride,
events,
anybody?
even illegal
Planning course.
actions, were at play.
Unit. Ready.
Harris's future campaigns would be funded by Phillips and other pro-communist groups, who also funded Hillary Clinton and Barack
Good under
Obama.
pressure.
Brown's entire political career was supported by
Let's take an
communists, and
excursion.
today Brown is
Planning
considered
course.
Communist China's best friend in California.
Checking
Harris
the
was
lines.
also supported by left-wing
I am not
communists, and
honest,
she
you know.
was elected
Checking
Attorney
with
General
that.
of California in 2010 and re-elected as Attorney General in 2014. While she was DA, Harris mentored Latifah Simon, a devoted Maoist and
Need a
member of
ride,
the Storm
anybody?
Revolutionary
Checking with
Movement.
map.
Simon later became chairperson
too
on the
close to
board of the
combat.
Bay Area Rapid Transit Authority. Harris maintained a close friendship with Black Lives Matter founder and dedicated
not
self-avowed
armed, you know.
Marxist Alicia Garza.
Hush.
And see our video on Black Lives
Running.
Matter
Armor
and
personnel
Garza.
carrier ready.
Harris openly supported BLM and Antifa's terrorist actions and created the bail fund to get both BLM and Antifa criminals out of jail to continue their rampages. See our video on Antifa. Now, elected members of Congress do not undergo the same FBI security background checks that military personnel and government defense contractors do. Due to her 4 decades of close associations with known communists, Marxist, Maoist, and criminal activity as a DA and later as AG, she could have never entered a military service academy or obtained a security clearance. Another massive security threat is her husband, Doug Emhoff, part of the DLA law firm with over 30 years of work with Communist China, and with 140 lawyers dedicated to its China Investment Services branch. Emhoff was appointed as a professor at Yale University Law School, where he educates up-and-coming lawyers on the finer points of communism. Go figure. He would not pass a security background check either. When Harris was elected to the Senate, she selected pro-communist activist Karine Jean-Pierre, then the Senate Chief of Staff, for consideration as White House spokesperson. Then VP Harris cast the deciding vote in the Senate in March 2021 to pass the Green New Deal scam, which cost taxpayers about $2 trillion and created the highest inflation in 40 years. None of those funds went to positive or viable projects, but instead sent taxpayer money to Democrat cronies and supported liberal social and political programs. Her other platform was Medicare for All, a government single-payer system that would have eliminated private health insurance for most Americans, closed many hospitals, many more would be forced to lay off employees, including doctors and nurses, and had an estimated cost of $44 trillion over 10 years. It would have exploded unemployment rates in the medical fields and bankrupted the nation. During the primary debate in 2020, Senator and presidential hopeful Joseph Biden, and see our 4-part videos on him, alluded to a crime lab scandal that involved Harris's district attorney's office and resulted in more than 1,000 drug cases being dismissed. Biden claimed that 1,000 drug cases had to be dismissed when Harris was DA. And it's accurate, although Harris denied knowing about the problems with the crime lab that triggered those dismissals until the issue became public knowledge. This was a lie. Longtime San Francisco public defender Jeff Adachi criticized Harris's handling of the crime lab situation back in 2010, and during a January interview 2024 with the Sacramento Bee, he explained this. The San Francisco drug lab was shut down after a lead technician, who testified on behalf of prosecutors on drug cases, was found to have systematically mishandled the drug samples seized from suspects and even consuming some herself. While the San Francisco Police Department was responsible for running the lab and not Harris's DA office, a court ruled in 2010 that the district attorney's office violated defendants' constitutional rights by not disclosing to defense attorneys and the court what it knew about the tainted drug evidence. Judge Anne Christine Masulo wrote in her decision that prosecutors at the highest levels of the district attorney's office knew that Madden was not a dependable witness at trial and that there were serious concerns regarding the crime lab. Of course, Harris denied being aware of the drug lab issues at the time and also noted that her office implemented a Brady policy only after the drug lab scandal came to her attention. A Brady policy refers to Brady versus Maryland, a case in which exculpatory evidence or any evidence that may be deemed helpful to the defense must be disclosed. Many were friends and political donors and supporters. This was similar to the Duke lacrosse case in Durham, North Carolina, and DA Michael Nifong. And see our video on the Duke lacrosse case. During the 2019 Democratic presidential debate, Representative and presidential hopeful Tulsi Gabbard sharply criticized Kamala Harris's record as California Attorney General, stating, "She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so." Gabbard was referring to the case of Kevin Cooper, a black man sentenced to death for the 1983 murders of 4 people in Chino Hills, California. Cooper came within hours of execution in 2004. Years later, mounting questions about the case led to a 2018 New York Times article by journalist Nicholas Kristof, which alleged that police may have framed Cooper and that Harris during her tenure as Attorney General, had refused to allow new DNA testing that could potentially exonerate him. After the article's publication, Harris called Christoph and repeatedly said, "I feel awful about this." She also issued a public statement urging authorities to allow the testing, a reversal that many viewed as politically motivated, given her rising national profile. While Cooper's guilt or innocence remains legally unresolved, critics argued that Harris failed to pursue all available evidence in the case. According to the Wall Street Journal, she had also ignored a 2005 recommendation from her staff to adopt a policy aligned with the Brady Doctrine, which would have required her office to disclose potentially exculpatory evidence to defendants. In February 2019, California Governor Gavin Newsom ordered new DNA testing in the case. However, after the court approved the testing, critical pieces of evidence, including Cooper's clothing, were discovered missing from the police evidence locker. Harris has never explained why she opposed the testing initially during her tenure as Attorney General, and no one can explain where the evidence went, but many observers believe political calculation played a role.
Yes, Commander.
Harris then had another issue. The Supreme Court ruled 6-3 against the state in favor of a group founded by conservative donors Charles and David Koch, called the Americans for Prosperity Foundation. The foundation, along with the Thomas More Law Center, sued Attorney General Harris for enforcing a state law requiring them to disclose the names of their famous donors, when Democrat donors were not required to disclose such information. The ruling had an immediate effect on charitable donors who want to keep their identities hidden from state authorities, although the IRS still requires federal disclosure. Some campaign ethics watchdogs believe the High Court's decision could eventually upend rules that require big donors to disclose their political giving to the public. This would help eliminate dark money. During Harris's 13-year tenure as district attorney and then attorney general, she failed to prosecute even one case of priest sexual abuse, although over 50 California cities brought charges against priests during that period. In 2010, Kamala Harris, then San Francisco district attorney, was running for California Attorney General, and for some reason, her record of covering up sex abuse records belonging to the San Francisco Archdiocese was never part of the political news of her record. She had media cover. Rick Simmons, an attorney who represented victims of clergy sexual abuse in California, said Harris's action of covering up documents on the cases shows a pattern in practice and policy of ignoring the rights of children by one of the largest institutions of the city and county of San Francisco and in the Bay Area. Later, in her convention speech, Harris claimed, "As a young courtroom prosecutor in Oakland, California, I stood up for women and children against predators who abused them." Really? However, investigative journalist Peter Schweitzer revealed that in addition to campaign donations from multiple law firms defending San Francisco priests against abuse claims, multiple board members of San Francisco Catholic Archdiocese-related organizations donated another $50,950 to Harris's campaign. Schweitzer said, Harris had no particular ties to the Catholic Church or Catholic organizations, but the money still came in large, unprecedented sums. The total amount contributed by the Catholic Archdiocese was never really fully disclosed. Schweitzer alleged that connections Harris had with powerful people within the Archdiocese influenced her to bury the records with allegations against the priests. He also wrote, her office would strangely hide vital records on abuses that had occurred. The Democrats rallied to defend her, saying, District Attorney Harris focuses her efforts on putting child molesters in prison. Her office stated, in an effort to refute those claims of ignorance of the situation or even the cover-up, we're not interested in selling out our victims to look good in the paper. Her predecessor and opponent in that race, Hallinan, had been pursuing abuse cases against the church. Catholics, afraid of his investigations, backed Kamala Harris in the race. The records that Hallinan had in his possession touched on well-connected institutions at the heart of California's power structure. St. Ignatius College Preparatory School in the Archdiocese of San Francisco counted former California Governor Jerry Brown and the powerful Getty family, to include Gavin Newsom, his connections to them as alumni. The school faced enormous vulnerabilities because of abuse problems there. Based on documents later released by the Jesuits who ran St. Ignatius in the early 60-year span from 1923 to 1982, in 43 of those years, the school had cases of abuse by priests against children. Hallinan's investigation threatened to bring dozens of additional cases to light. Hallinan believed that the clergy abuse files were a matter of public record. Harris refused to release them to the public. Hallinan's pursuit brought forward a wave of victims who said they had been raped or molested by clergy over the years. Just months after opening his inquiry, Hallinan used a grand jury to begin issuing indictments. Victims groups were outraged by her actions. Far from protecting victims, they argued, the cover-up was actually protecting the abusers by keeping their alleged crimes secret. One might have thought Harris, whose anti-Catholic instincts led her as a senator to harass Donald Trump's judicial nominee to the Supreme Court for nothing more than having membership in the Knights of Columbus, and would have enjoyed prosecuting the church for sexual abuse. But she didn't. Why? Because they donated heavily to her campaign. Harris also received money from church fixer Joseph Rossaniello and the law firm of Cooley Godwin, where he served as a partner. Harris then tapped Rossaniello for her advisory board. Another law firm, writes Schweitzer, Bingham McCutcheon, which handled legal matters for the archdiocese concerning Catholic charities, donated $2,825, the maximum allowed, or at least what was disclosed. Arguedas, Cashman, and Headley, a firm representing a priest in an abuse case at the time, also donated $4,550 to Harris. The lawyer in the case, Christina Arguedas, also served on Kamala Harris's advisory council, Schweitzer wrote. After Hallinan lost to Harris, the fate of the investigation into Catholic priest abuse would dramatically change, and not for the better, according to Schweitzer. Harris quickly buried Hallinan's abuse investigations. Harris, who had been a sexual crimes prosecutor early in her career, moved in the opposite direction of Hallinan and worked to cover up the records. In fact, she sealed them. Unbelievably, while running for vice president, Kamala Harris bragged about her supposed passion for helping victims of sexual abuse while speaking at the Democratic National Convention. That was when Tulsi Gabbard struck, highlighting her track record of failing to prosecute sexual abuse cases within the Catholic Church and even hiding vital records on abuses that had occurred when she was a San Francisco district attorney. In fact, she sealed the records forever. In another case, lawyers under the oversight of then Attorney General Kamala Harris's lawyers argued early release from prison would harm the prison's labor program, which included its work program to help fight California wildfires. The judges rejected the argument. Basically, Harris wanted to keep inmates in who were eligible for parole for slave labor. One case was illustrative of Harris's hypocrisy on the death penalty. Officer Isaac Espinoza and his partner were in plain clothes when they approached a man in their unmarked vehicle on April 10, 2004. Espinoza, then age 29, stepped out and flashed a light at David Hill, according to accounts at trial. Hill fired several rounds from an AK-47. Two struck Espinoza, killing him. Espinoza's partner was injured, and Hill was arrested and accused of first-degree murder, along with other charges. The newly elected DA, Harris, despite her reluctance to pursue the death penalty against Hill, consistent with her position while she campaigned for the office, was offensive to many who attended Espinoza's funeral. This is not the only definition of tragedy. It's the special circumstance called for by the death penalty, former Democrat Senator Dianne Feinstein told the mourners, provoking a resounding standing ovation. This was in contradiction to her fellow Democrat Kamala Harris. The decision pitted Harris against the police. Isaac paid the ultimate price, said San Francisco Police Officers Association President Gary DeLagnes at the funeral, and I speak for all officers in demanding that his killer also pay the ultimate price. The trial jury rejected the charge of first-degree murder, not finding the act premeditated, and Hill's conviction and life sentence were upheld in 2011. Harris also oversaw another case that placed her credibility into question. A woman named Priscilla Lualamaga
Unit ready.
claimed to have witnessed a fatal July 2007 shooting of Jamal Chulov's friend Sue Kuka, who was shot in the back in July 2007 at San Francisco's Sunnydale housing development, and she told police that she saw the event. But there was a problem. Lualamaga had initially identified a different man as the shooter in a photo lineup. Later, for whatever reason, she changed her story with police support and said she was convinced that Jamal Chulov was the shooter. This was after the police showed her another photo lineup and told her the shooter was in that lineup, and Lualamaga said Chulov, whom she knew as a neighbor, looks like the guy who could have shot the victim.
What is the mission?
When the case went to
Conscript
trial in
reporting.
2010, the DA's office put
Building.
both Lualamaga and her sister in
Ready
witness
for
protection
waiting order.
and
Maneuvering
advertised it
order
in the
received.
media,
Do you have
citing
a plan?
alleged threats to
Maneuvering.
taint the jury. There were no
Good, under
threats, it was
pressure.
covering their collective sixes. The appellate court later wrote there was no evidence of any threats or any other actual danger presented by defendant, his friends, or his family to Lualamaga or her family. There was no forensic evidence linking Chulov to the crime,
Let's clear the
only
air.
Lualamaga
I'll carry out the
testimony,
operation. Good,
which
under
was the
pressure.
only
Check under
evidence
pressure.
presented. The police and DA failed to mention that Lualamaga had failed to ID Chulov in the first photo lineup, which was a Brady violation.
Unit ready.
And make no mistake, Kamala Harris was deeply involved in this case, which was politically hot, and Chulov was convicted and sentenced to 50 years to life. Chulov recounted after his conviction, quote, "I'll never forget when I turned around and I looked, and I seen Kamala Harris, we locked eyes this one time, and she laughed. She literally just kind of busted out laughing."
Unit
But later, that case began to unravel. On appeal, Chulov accused 4 San Francisco police officers of framing him. An 8-member jury in Oakland heard 3 weeks of testimony and deliberated for 2 days before unanimously finding that the 2 lead homicide inspectors on the case, Michael Johnson and Maureen D'Amico, had violated Chulov's rights by fabricating evidence against him, witness tampering, and withholding exculpatory evidence. On the appeal, a ballistics expert testified that Lualamaga, the only eyewitness claiming to have seen Chulov commit the crime and at the scene, could not have observed the shooting from the direction she was facing given the round's trajectory and her location. Harris ensured that the crooked cops suffered no criminal charges. The jurors found no wrongdoing by a third inspector, Robert McMillan, or by Officer John Evans, the crime scene investigator. All 4 officers are now retired. Chulov was acquitted in March 2015 and went on to be an actor and had a role in the film The Last Black Man in San Francisco. A federal lawsuit he filed after his release, noting that he was stabbed in prison when he failed to give his cell's bottom bunk to a gang leader, cost the city and county of San Francisco $13 million in reparations. In another case, that of Efren Velasco Palacios, he was accused of lewd and lascivious conduct with a child, meaning a conviction could trigger a life sentence, and Attorney General Harris, who had sealed the cases against priests accused of the same crime, went after him viciously. Later, it was proven that a Kern County prosecutor named Robert
Unit
Murray
ready.
invented 2 lines of supposedly incriminating testimony during Palacios' interrogation in 2013. Murray sent the falsified transcript to the defendant's public
Unit
defender.
ready.
When the public defender discovered the fabrication, he successfully argued to get the case dismissed, but Harris's Justice Department appealed. Their unbelievable argument was the charges shouldn't have been dismissed because, while the prosecutor did fake the lines, he didn't physically assault Velasco Palacios. Dismissal is an appropriate sanction for government misconduct that is egregious enough to prejudice the defendant's constitutional rights, the California Court of Appeals found in 2015. Harris's response? Get this. On appeal, however, the people dispute that the prosecutor's misconduct was outrageous or conscience-shocking in a constitutional sense, as it was not physically brutal. So, according to Harris, it's okay to create evidence and lie about a man to frame him only because he was not beaten.
Conscript
The appellate
reporting.
court justices
Moving
said it
out.
found no support for that argument.
What
If
are
Harris
they,
really
comrade?
thinks that knowingly producing a fraudulent document to secure an illicit advantage isn't outrageous, then perhaps she slept through her legal ethics courses, wrote Glenn Harlan Reynolds, a University of Tennessee law professor, in 2015. For Murray himself, he described his actions to the state bar court as a joke and a prank. Really. The bar recommended a 2-year suspension. Murray later worked at the Office of the Inspector General and has had an active law license since 2018, according to the state bar
Let's clear the
website.
air. Do you
No
have any
criminal
other
penalty for
operation
falsifying evidence against an innocent man,
Yes,
and
Commander.
Harris covered
Yes,
it.
Commander.
Kamala Harris built her career on a public image of progress,
Commander.
justice, and accountability.
Yes,
But behind the
Commander.
speeches and slogans lies a record filled with political opportunism, cross-control misconduct, and questionable alliances. From refusing to release exculpatory evidence to shielding abusers to prioritizing political optics over the truth, Harris has repeatedly chosen ambition over integrity. She didn't just fail upward, she was protected, promoted, and polished by a system more interested in power than truth and accountability. History may forget the slogans, but it rarely forgets the truth. Thank you for watching this episode of Forgotten History. If you liked what you saw, please click like, share, and subscribe. And if you would like to assist with the ever-increasing cost of production, please consider becoming a channel member and joining our Patreon page.
Unit ready.
Watertight, comrade. They won't detect our approach. Watertight, comrade.
Please check out our merchandise store.
Use
Good,
stealth.
under
Thanks for
pressure.
watching.
They won't detect our approach.
Unit ready.
Torpedoes armed.
Use stealth.
Unit ready.
Watertight, comrade.
Unit
Dive!
ready.
Good fishing here. Sounds good.
Unit promoted.
Do you have a plan? Armored personnel carrier.
Everyone,
ready.
God bless you.
Clear the air.
Christ is risen. So
Unit
thankful
ready.
that you're tuning in today. I have a reflection that I've prepared for you entitled Emperor Constantine and the Renewal of Culture. I'm recording this on the eve of the feast of the Holy God-crowned Kings and equal of the Apostles, Constantine and his pious mother Helen. I find their lives, which we'll vigorously celebrate tomorrow all throughout the Orthodox world, I find their lives incredibly inspiring and relevant to the condition of the world today. We're asking the question, I think, all across the West. We're asking the question, can Christian culture be renewed? Is there a future for America? Is there a future for Europe that has Christ in it?
Unit
Can we arrest the cultural
Do you have a
collapse?
plan?
The ascendancy
the
of
operation.
godless secularism that has so decimated human
building.
thriving
Unit armor
and has
upgraded.
led to such sorrow,
Unit ready.
both in its communist forms and in its globalization materialist
What is the
forms
mission? Getting
promoted
in
by
closer.
Europe and America. Both have been weighed in the balance and found to be completely deficient. Grotesque, in fact, forms of life. And so we have this question about renewal. Is it possible? Or are we going to literally just go up in smoke? Can Christian society be renewed? You know, if you are a careful student of Holy Scripture, you'll know that in the Old Testament, during the period of the Judges and also during the period of the Kings, society was prospering when it had incredible leadership of holy judges, great judges, like Samuel, and society was collapsing when it was governed by godless and sinful kings. If everyone was left to do what was right in their own eyes, this hideous refrain in the book of Judges, society was swirling down the toilet, and if a person, a man or a woman of integrity and vision and leadership that was respected and could call men and women to their true destiny, and could lead them in cultural renewal, in repentance and belief in the true God, then society prospered. We ought not underestimate the power of godly leadership. It is far greater than anyone could calculate in sheer numbers. When the fear of God exists in someone's heart and it's combined with love and giftedness, great things can happen in culture. Church history is also full of inspiring leaders like this, people who were called to the helm, not of the church, but of the state, who collaborated with the church for the renewal of society. Great kings like Emperor Constantine, whose feast is tomorrow, or the great saintly emperors Theodosius the Great at the end of the 4th century, Justinian the Great in the 6th century, Saint Boris, the King of Bulgaria, Saint Vladimir and the Rus, Saint Alfred in England, Saint Edward the Confessor in England, Saint Stephen of Hungary. These incredible leaders brought renewal to their people, brought renewal to their civilizations, and helped people to know God. And no one at the time of their youth could have guessed that these leaders would bring such blessing, such increase of human thriving and happiness, such cultural renewal. We have been chewing on the empty, tasteless husks of godless society in its most extreme form in the 20th century in godless communism, but also in its materialist form in globalization. And we're done. Our culture is done. We have seen where it goes. It ends up in the same place. Tyranny, godlessness, the abridgment of human freedom. In whatever form this godlessness has arisen in this last 100 years, it has produced the same awfulness. And we're weary of it. We're weary of this radical secularization. I remember when I was younger, my wife and I, we spent 2 summers in Prague, in what is now the Czech Republic. At that time it was Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia had not separated. And the first summer was the summer of 1989. It was the last summer of communism in Czech. And it was a time for us. We were there to do some evangelization. We were there speaking with people about Jesus and leading Bible studies and those types of things. That Christmas was the Velvet Revolution. That November of the 17th of 1989, the dissident poet Václav Havel led the peaceful overthrow of communism in Czechoslovakia. The next summer, Presbytera and I returned to Czech, and there was radical difference even in that 6-month period between the Velvet Revolution and our return. But I remember mostly being impacted, not just by the sense of freedom in speaking with people about Christ and the interest of people to speak about Jesus in public, but also immediately we were confronted by the grotesque underbelly of the globalization effort, which was the appearance in Haas Square of a McDonald's. That was the most obvious sign that communism was not there and Western industrialization, Western commercialization was happening, but also the free and open distribution of pornography in all the train stations. It was everywhere. You didn't even have to pay for it. They were literally passing out pornography everywhere. And I thought to myself, really, this is what it means for the overthrow of communism in Czechoslovakia? You have McDonald's coming and feeding, I guess it's food, less than great food at reasonable prices, and you have open pornography. How grievous, how sad. I really thought to myself, you know, choose your evil. You want communism with all of its attendant evils, or you want godless materialism. Both worthless, absolutely worthless. No, what Czech needed and we need is a renewal of Christian culture. Cultures can change depending on the leadership of a land. Tomorrow is the feast day of Saints Constantine and Helen, and Constantine stands as a clear marker of what one man devoted to God can accomplish. Let's also add his pious mother into the equation, who really launched her labors at the age of 70. Incredible woman. But these pious leaders, Constantine and Helen, show us what can be done when the heart of man is changed and when a leader arises in a culture, calling a culture to humanity, calling a culture to be truly God's. I'm going to speak a little bit about what Emperor Constantine did that was so fundamental and set such incredible precedent that would be followed in the Eastern Roman Empire for over 1,000 years. But I would like to say also a word about St. Helen, who began her work of devotion to Christ as an older woman at a time when the average age for a woman to perish was in the 40s. She began her labors at 70. She went to the Holy Land. She engaged in a massive architectural investment, building the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, building the Grotto Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem, and many other holy sites on the Mount of Olives, the Ascension Church. Her labors, supported by Emperor Constantine, both as an offering of repentance and also as a love gift to Christ, who had saved her son and made him emperor by the miracle of the appearance of his cross in the sky. We ought not forget the great Saint Helen and her devotion to, with the support of her son, to Christian worship, because at the heart of renewing culture is to renew the place of God in culture. Sometimes here in the West, we like to start at the bottom and to start in the earthly realm when we're considering the renewal of culture. We think about laws and the second six of the second table of the Ten Commandments, the last six of the 10. We ought not miss the fact, however, that the Ten Commandments start with the first four dedicated to God, because the supreme commandment is not to love your neighbor as yourself. The supreme commandment is to love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Any culture that is going to succeed has to enthrone the worship of God, the love of God at its very heart. And this is exactly what Emperor Constantine did and his pious mother Helen, and this is what was behind their incredible devotion to the faith and to church building and to worship and to erecting the precious cross of our Savior. So let's not talk about the restoration of Judeo-Christian values. That's very recent, untested, unhistoric language. We don't talk there. Let's talk about Christian values, and let's be explicit that those Christian values have right at the heart of them the worship of the Holy Trinity. If any culture is going to be revived, if anything's going to happen in our lands that is going to please God and pull us from this spiral descent into misery, it must include the exaltation of the Lord God and a commitment to honor Him in worship, to support the church, and to enthrone His commandments. Not just those that are acceptable to secular man. No. The most important ones, which is His central place in our societies. Churches at the center of towns, villages, and great cities everywhere. By the way, this is exactly how Europe was built, and this is exactly how America was built. The idea that America was built without the church and without pastors front and center, that's a fake America. That's not how it happened. Let me say a few words now about Emperor Constantine. His divine calling from God when he saw the precious cross. Remember that he was the son of Constantius Chlorus, the Western emperor under Diocletian, who was responsible for the furthest western province of the Roman Empire, Britannia, also of Gaul and Spain. Constantine himself, the son of Constantius Chlorus, Constantine was enthroned in York, in the northern part of England. In fact, his enthronement stone, the stone upon which he stood, manhood to the acclaim of his soldiers in the year 306 is preserved in the basement museum of the York Minster. There's also a beautiful museum dedicated to Constantine. Tons of artifacts. We're not exactly sure where his mother Helen was born. Some say Bithynia, but there's also the tradition that she was from Colchester in Britain, which is the oldest recorded town from Roman times. In fact, if you go to Colchester today and you go to the city hall, you'll find a massive statue of the Empress Helen on top of City Hall, holding the cross that appeared to her son. We have two Orthodox churches there. I, many years ago, traveled to Colchester with my spiritual father, Bishop Basil, and visited the priest, Father Alexander, there. At that time, the Orthodox Church was meeting in a chapel that was part of the ancient Colosseum from almost 2,000 years ago in Colchester. The relics of St. Helen have been, were given, in fact, by Bishop Basil to Father Alexander. And I remember seeing pictures of the mayor and Father Alexander and parishioners processing with the relics of Helen into the church down the streets of Colchester. Yes, absolutely magnificent. So Constantine was enthroned, acclaimed emperor. This is 306. 6 years later, you know a little bit about the famous march that he did towards Rome, taking city after city in northern Italy, leaving the towns unmolested. And just as he's coming to the northern part of Rome, his life is forever changed by a vision of the cross of Christ and the words, "By this sign conquer." Constantine had the Roman eagle replaced by the cross of Christ and by Jesus' name, and his soldiers marched under the banner of Jesus. That incredible miracle is related by the great apologist, early apologist Lactantius. You can read it from him, or Eusebius, Bishop Eusebius of Caesarea, the great biographer and eulogizer of St. Constantine. Both describe that miracle. On the feast day tomorrow of Emperor Constantine, we say this in the Ex Apostolarium: "Not from man did great Constantine with his blessed mother Helen receive the royal sovereignty, but by God's grace from heaven. For he beheld the divine cross as a bright flashing trophy. With it he was victorious over all who opposed him, and he destroyed the deceit and error of all the idols, while making strong throughout the world Orthodox faith and practice." And in the praises for the feast, it reads that Constantine was the, quote, "first of Christian kings, since the king of all created things foresaw thy goodness of heart and thy ready obedience. He through reason captured thee when unreason ruled over thee. And having made thee to shine in heart and mind with certain knowledge of godly piety, he showed thee to the world as a shining sun that sendeth forth the beams of all godly deeds, wise and glorious." Constantine, climbing a hill and considering in perplexity the great numbers of his opponents, the troops of his opponents were far greater than his own, he saw this vision of the enormous cross of our Savior, and in this sign conquer he did. The following night, the Lord Christ appeared to Constantine and commanded him to make a cross and erect it in the front of his army as his standard, and he believed in Jesus. And in place of the eagles, the cross borne as a sign of victory over death and a trophy of immortality, led by Constantine to victory. Christ's name was wrapped in the purple cloth, covered with precious gemstones, and then at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge on October 28, 312, Constantine routed Maxentius, this tyrant and tormentor of Rome, and he was killed and his officers drowned. Rome greeted Constantine then as a liberator, a savior, and a benefactor of the city. He immediately placed the sign of the cross on the tops of all the principal buildings in the city. A statue was erected of Constantine with him holding the cross in his right hand with the inscription, quote, "By virtue of this salutary sign, which is the true test of valor, I have preserved and liberated your city from the yoke of tyranny." Don't we need that today, let me tell you. The famous Arch of Constantine, just adjacent to the Roman Colosseum, was erected at this time to commemorate the victory of Constantine and his deliverance of Rome from tyranny. This arch also marks the time when the persecution of Christianity ceased, because the very next year Constantine, the Emperor of the West, and Licinius, the Emperor of the East, signed a mutual decree, the Edict of Milan, liberating Christians and legalizing the Christian faith. This marked a radical change in the history of the Christian church, perhaps only rivaled by the rise of Islam, which was a change in the opposite direction in the 7th century.
Checking currents.
By the way, if any of you visit my parish, if you're ever out visiting California on vacation or you move out here, we have in the Orlitz, in the bishop's medallion, which we have in mosaic in a massive 8 feet by 8 feet in the middle of the church, we have depicted the Arch of Constantine at the base of the medallion. And the inscription on the arch reads as following. This is what the inscription says. To the Emperor Caesar Flavius Constantine Maximus, Pius Felix Augustus, since through divine inspiration and great wisdom he has delivered the state from the tyrant and all his factions by his army and noble army, do we not need to be delivered ourselves from the tyranny of the godless leadership of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century? I certainly think so. From all their factions, and from their army of censors and many tyrants and noble arms, the Senate and the Roman people dedicate this arch decorated with triumphal insignia. From this time, Emperor Constantine began to receive catechism himself. Of course, he had been deeply influenced by his mother, as had his father. His father was known to be extremely gracious to Christians. But at this time he began his formal catechism and to study the lives of the saints, and to receive teaching from the bishops, which is something that he did aggressively for the rest of his days, for the next 25 years, until he fell asleep in the Lord at 337. The church historian Eusebius says from this time, quote, he made the priests of God his counselors. This is an obvious basic characteristic of Christian society, is that the civil leaders act in concert with the priests. They receive moral instruction, prophetic word, and prayer from the priests. And by the way, this is not only the European model, 100% it was. Europe is Christian Europe based upon the counsel and leadership of the church. It's also the American way. It hasn't been the American way since the middle of the 20th century, but until that time, not only were pastors front and center in providing moral guidance to teachers, to legislators, to the courts and judges, even having the teachings of the scriptures codified in our laws. That was just normal. That is what produced America. The post-1960s secularization of law and our courts did not produce America. In fact, they have been ruining America by this false, intentional stripping of the divine from our culture and education and law. Constantine made the priests of God his counselors. This is his first act, which he maintained throughout the course of his life. He invited the bishops of the church to dine with him regularly. He freed all priests permanently from taxation. By the way, that protection of clergy from taxation has informed all Christian civilization and has undergirded even some principles of taxation that still exist in America today, like the housing allowance for pastors. Our culture knows the importance of pastors. They know that pastors are notoriously underpaid, and our government has provided protection from taxes with regards to the housing allowance. This is a deduction. And it's also been targeted by secular congressmen for the last 50 years. Thank God it has never succeeded, and the nation has been able to keep this in American law. Eusebius says, while commenting on Constantine's liberality to the poor, his love for orphans and widows, that it was hardly possible to be near Constantine without being given something from him. He restored all the goods confiscated by Maxentius. He recalled the exiles. He set captives free. He had a search made for the relics of all the martyrs who perished in the great persecution that took place just prior to his ascension to rule under Emperor Diocletian. Remember the terrible last great persecution that really didn't end until 305, 306. He didn't just legalize Christianity, but he encouraged the growth of the Christian faith by his own example. He granted subsidies for the buildings of churches. The adornment of martyrs' tombs and shrines came from his hands. He honored the bishops and priests. He commissioned the making of 50 magnificent Bibles for the cathedrals and major churches of the empire. Some think that the Codex Vaticanus and the Codex Sinaiticus might be part of those 50. It's not something that is agreed upon. It's disputed. But that's how old those codices are. He endowed the office of bishop with many important responsibilities in the state. He presided at local councils of bishops and even called the first ecumenical council himself. He was well known for his humane treatment of prisoners, for forbidding the mistreatment of enemies, even rewarding his soldiers with a certain amount of gold for every prisoner that they left unmolested. From this moment on, Emperor Constantine, the sole ruler of the Romans, sought to offer his empire to Jesus Christ as a gift. He put new magistrates in the civil posts. He refused to allow them to make pagan sacrifices. He exhorted, though never forced, all his subjects to Christian conversion. He suppressed idolatry. This new Christian empire would last over 1,000 years, the longest in human history. He dedicated the building of Byzantium, which became Constantinople, to Christ, to build from the ground up a city not based on idolatry, but based on Christian worship. The city was erected on the site of the small town of Byzantium on November 8, 324, and given the name Constantinople and New Rome. The city itself was dedicated to the Mother of God, and in the middle of the palace, an immense cross was erected. Relics were placed in the middle of the hippodrome. Building for Christ is key. This is what leaders do. They build, they make monuments, churches, universities, dedications to God and to the saints. This is just universal. Emperor Constantine supported his mother Helen's labors in the Holy Land, helping her discover the true cross, adorning the Holy Land with shrines and churches and monasteries, especially the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem and the Nativity Church in Bethlehem, the glorious Church of the Ascension on the Mount of Olives. In 326, Empress Helen undertook with her son's fervent support a pilgrimage to Palestine, in which she engaged for the last decade of her life in honoring Christ in his birthplace. Her funeral took place in Constantinople, and her body was transferred to Rome. Her sarcophagus, to this day, is in the Pio Clementine Vatican Museum. She died at the age of 80 as a model of how to use your senior years, to say the least. She did, by the way, most of her work in her 70s. True example to us. There's a beautiful story of Constantine's humility, that someone was throwing rocks at his statue, and his servants came to him and related this to him and said that they needed satisfaction, that he should demand satisfaction in this man's flesh. And Constantine just rubbed his face and he said, I don't feel any pain and I am in good health. Let the man go without punishment. Yes. You know, Emperor Constantine also appeared to Elder Paisios of Athos, St. Paisios now, fell asleep just 30 years ago. And in this vision, he appeared to Paisios and he said this to him, very beautiful. He said, I am Constantine the Great. I have descended from the heavens in order to reveal to you the glory which monastics are shown in the heavens, as well as their closeness to Christ and their boldness before him. I reproach and accuse myself that I did not attain to such splendor as that of the rank of monk. I cannot reckon the loss which I have incurred, and I do not have the same boldness as monks do, nor do I have an honor equal to theirs. What an incredible word, both to show the glory of Emperor Constantine and how he's being honored in paradise, but also his incredibly humble reverence for the church, and especially for our monks and nuns who have offered their lives as love gifts to Jesus. He spent his last years in peace. He made profound Christianizations of Roman law. He made Sunday the day of rest. He abolished crucifixion. He ended gladiatorial contests. He severely punished rape and assault and emphasized the family, limiting divorce, which has always been the actions of Christian leadership. This is why you can see how horrible our leadership here in America has been since 1969, when the first no-fault divorce laws were passed in this country, and then marriage has just been trampled in every way. Not guarding the integrity of marriage, punishing marriage, rewarding single motherhood with funds. I mean, it's nuts what we've done. And legalizing and even promoting all forms of sexual perversity. So sad. We must follow the great kings in revering the family, guarding Christian marriage, limiting divorce, condemning adultery, which he did, encouraging the single life. He became calm and peaceful and known as the master of the passions, and he's depicted on his coinage with his eyes turned to heaven in prayer. He built a meditation chapel for prayers in his castle there in Constantinople. He met frequently with priests and monks in the palace. He discussed the law of God until late in the night and set an example for future kings and rulers in Christian lands. He reposed on the Feast of Pentecost in 337 and was buried in the Church of the Holy Apostles in Constantinople in the midst of the 12 apostles themselves. In Constantine, the Church of Christ found its universal vocation to give all the world to Christ, to be a light to the world. The Church remembers St. Constantine in the hymnody for the feast tonight and tomorrow. We remember Constantine in many ways as a model of virtue. In Vespers, we say Constantine was given David's meekness and gentleness, the wisdom of Solomon, and the orthodoxy of the 12 apostles. We say that he was a thirsty student of Holy Scripture. This is the fulfillment, of course, of Moses' words in Deuteronomy 17, where he commands that kings must have a copy of the law next to their throne and must have someone read it out to them orally, a portion of it every day. That's basic. You want to give someone power, you want to make them a president, you want to make them a senator, you want to make them a king, especially the latter. They need to hear the word of God and remember who is the authority in the world, because power is so dangerous. And that is exactly what Constantine did. He became a model of virtue, a devoted student of the Scriptures, a famed lover of Holy Pascha, of Easter, who gave his great energy to the celebration of the feast. He's commemorated in the services as an overthrower of Greek pagan idolatry and of Christian heresy both. The text from Orthros says, longing after Christ, he despised the idols and raised up on earth a temple unto him that was crucified for us. He's cherished. Constantine is cherished as a unifier of the church. From his service at the Lyti, we say, thou didst brighten the whole church by bringing the assembly of the faithful together in Nicaea. He was known as a zealot for the laws of God in Ode 7 of the Orthros. Keeping thy commandments, O Lord, Constantine submitted himself to thy law. Therefore he destroyed the battalions of the lawless, and he cried to thee, O God, blessed art thou. And in the sessional hymns from Orthros, among all kinds thou wast shown most pious, honoring the statutes of the King of the heavens.
Deep sea vessels standing by.
He was hymned as a builder of churches. In the Orthros we say, today the memorial of the pious Constantine is risen up like myrrh that is poured out. For longing after Christ he despised the idols, and raised up on earth a temple unto him that was crucified for us. And in the heavens he hath received the crown of his hope. He filled the capital city of Constantinople with churches. He supported his mother to do the same all throughout the Holy Land. We have a letter, in fact, of Bishop Eusebius of Caesarea about enlarging the churches in his life. He's ambitious to do that. And he became, of course, what he's most famous for, which is an establisher of the veneration of the precious cross of our Savior. The first thing mentioned in divine service is that God gave the cross as a mighty weapon to our emperor, by which he reigned righteously and justly, showing forth in piety. And let me end, dear one, this word on the great God-crowned King Constantine with his Apolytikion. Having seen the image of thy cross in heaven, and like Paul, having received the call not from men, thine apostle among kings entrusted the commonwealth to thy hand, O Lord. Keep us always in peace by the intercessions of the Theotokos, O only friend of man. I want you to know and cherish the incredible patrimony that we Christians have in the example and life of St. Constantine the Great and his pious mother Helen. They are our precious inheritance, and they have set a model for us that should be imitated in all lands where Christians live. If you want to know more about Constantine and other kings like him, you can go onto the Patristic Nectar app, go to Theological Lectures, and then look for a series called God's Statesmen, Noble Pious Kings. And you'll see there a 10 lecture series that I did some years ago about great kings. You can also go to the app, push on the Synaxarion for May the 21st, and listen to his life on that feast day. If you want to dive a little bit more, you can in fact read in the Nicene Fathers series, which is of course available for free online. Eusebius, the Bishop of Caesarea's life of Constantine, and also his oration in praise of Constantine. And if you want something even more juicy, you can read Frieda Upson's Constantine the Great, which is published by Holy Cross Orthodox Press. I hope that this has been a good encouragement to you. We make our cross together. We ask God to bless the earth and to raise up incredible leadership, that culture might be renewed, in which Christ is exalted as Lord. Christ is risen.
Loading up the belt. I was born for this job.
Engines primed. Maintaining
blessed
position
Lord's
and
Day
depth.
to all of
Checking
you.
current. Maintaining position and depth. Checking current.
For November 17th, on which we commemorate Saint Gregory of Tours.
As we begin this new course in the St. John Chrysostom Catechetical School.
Now available on both Apple and Google Play stores.
Loading up the belt. Faster and faster.
Viral agent ready. Epidemic on the move. I am so very contagious.
Nikita Khrushchev, Stalinist and reformer. The Soviet head of state who denounced Stalin. The counterpart of John F. Kennedy, who brought the world to the brink of disaster. The Berlin Wall and the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Offensive military preparation. Adjusting rudder pressure stabilized. Propeller systems engaged. Boomer systems operational. Thrusting forward.
September 15th.
September 1959. In the middle of the Cold War, Nikita Khrushchev, Soviet premier and head of the Communist Party, flies to the USA.
President's guest house, across from the White House.
He brought the whole family to show communism with a human face and did all the things that regular politicians would do.
As usual, Sergei Khrushchev accompanies his father on this trip, taking along his camera. The family spends 12 days touring all over the USA.
It was like discovering the America, like Columbus. We read many things. We thought that America is the most developed country with the skyscrapers. And it was shocked that it was not skyscrapers everywhere.
A journey to a new, unknown world.
He danced with Shirley MacLaine and spoke to Rockefeller in New York. And Rockefeller said, "Look at you, you are just so public politician. If you came to America, before the revolution, you would have been a great leader of our trade unions." And Khrushchev said, "Which trade unions? I'm a great leader of the greatest country in the world."
Let's take the guns for a spin.
Nikita Khrushchev is convinced that communism is superior and always prepared to argue the point.
America has achieved a lot, but how long have you been around? 150 years of independence, and you've only got this far? We've been independent for less than 42 years, and in 7 years we'll be at the same level as you. and we'll keep on moving. When we pass you, we'll just wave and shout hello.
Air pressure stabilized.
He is dubbed Hurricane Nikita by the international
Checking
media.
currents.
This was vintage Khrushchev. He was
Boomer systems operational.
voluble, he
All
was
ahead,
loud,
full.
he was angry, he was provocative.
Nikita Khrushchev's outbursts are greeted with dismay around the world.
Collective thinking. Let's make some friends.
He liked to play emotional, unpredictable person. The same as Trump now.
A game which will become very serious during the coming years.
Boomer systems operational. Checking currents.
Americans have to treat us as equal. And we know that Americans don't want to respect anybody as equal. Khrushchev started this policy of crisis. It was Suez crisis, it was two Berlin crisis, and it is going higher, higher, and higher until it's ended with the Cuban Missile Crisis.
The journey Nikita Khrushchev reveals his dangerous.
As my grandmother used to say, very rarely, but she did say it to me twice. She said the Khrushchev of 1962 was not a Khrushchev of 1956. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. I think the kiss of power, especially the kiss of power in the Kremlin, is deadly. But I think in Khrushchev's excuse, at least I have an excuse for him, he came out of Stalin. I mean, he was Stalin's servant for decades.
Nikita Khrushchev spends his last years leading a withdrawn life outside Moscow. Here he records his memoirs on tape.
All ahead, full.
Enter the think tank. Mastermind on the move. Alpha wave ready. We're on diplomatic
Мы
mission.
поставили, по-моему, 42 ракеты. Ну, это сила, если так.
We shipped 42 missiles to Cuba. That was enough for a war. With that, we could have destroyed Chicago and New York. A very great danger for America. America had never been so close to being destroyed.
The recordings are made secretly, without the knowledge of his successor.
Operational. Thrusting forward.
He wanted to say people truth about Stalin. He told they want to restore the Stalinism. It is very dangerous to have possibility of a new dictator. And he wanted to leave this information to the people. As it was dangerous and nobody wanted to help him, I did it. I found him this German recorder, so I was most hated man at the time to the Brezhnev government and the KGB.
С чего же начать? Значит, я...
Where shall I begin? I think it would be best to start with the last days of Stalin's life.
Последних дней жизни Сталина.
March 1953 in Moscow.
My father came back to the home. It was sometimes about midnight, and he sit on the sofa, closed his eyes and said, Stalin died. For me, he was the leader. He was the father of the Soviet people. He may be not a god, but maybe higher than a god. I was very sad that he died.
For almost 30 years, Joseph Stalin had ruled the land with an iron fist.
I think Khrushchev felt Stalin's death as a kind of thunderclap. They had been for so long led by Stalin. The myth of Stalin had grown to such proportions. They had to be shocked. And part of that shock was probably a certain sense of mourning. But it was accompanied by a great sigh of relief that they had survived and now they were safe.
It was a huge relief for everybody. Now that swine Stalin is dead. Now we can finally wind back that spiral of violence that he constantly pushed onwards. Now we can construct socialism with a human face.
Who would succeed the dictator? Georgy Malenkov? Stalin's deputy, chief of the secret police, Lavrenti Beria, or Nikita Khrushchev?
Sea vessels standing by.
I don't think he was on the list at all. I think he was such a useful person for all of them. I mean, he was hard worker, and there is a great picture of them: Molotov, Mikoyan, Khrushchev, Stalin, and Khrushchev looks the least refined of them. He has this ridiculous hat that almost doesn't fit, very short pants, and you could see that he is not one of them. He's an outsider.
Nikita Khrushchev is born in 1894 in the border area of Russia and the Ukraine.
He was a peasant from the Russian little village. One time we went to see the place where he was born, and I know my uncle was there many times. And there was a place where the hut was. Apparently the hut was very poor. And at the age of 16, he and his father went to Ukraine. It was so close, and to become miners.
But Nikita Khrushchev would not remain in the mines for long. In 1918, he joins the Communist Party.
Boomer systems operational.
Khrushchev's education was minimal. He probably had no more than 2 years of elementary school education. But when he was a young man, he was already very ambitious and very energetic. And I think he stood out among other miners for his smarts. He was so shrewd.
He always admitted that he didn't have education. He was always telling my mother and his children that they needed education. And when my little sister went to her first day of school, in fact, he called her to wish her the good beginning of her future working life, because that was something that he believed she was studying. She was 6 years old, but she got sent on her way to be a great contributor to the Soviet state.
He rises rapidly through the party, from the provinces of the Ukraine to the center of power.
My father was elected as the delegate of one of the Communist Party Congress. In 1925, he traveled to Moscow, and he saw Stalin.
I was immediately fascinated by Stalin. We'd been invited to Moscow, young party members from Donetsk, and we had our photograph taken with him. He was very amusing, and he exuded great humanity. We were incredibly pleased we had the chance to talk to him.
He quickly saw the light and became a Stalinist.
A few years later, Khrushchev begins to study at an elite Moscow school. Via one of the other students, he gains access to supreme power.
When he was at the Industrial Academy, Khrushchev did indeed befriend Stalin's wife, who apparently praised him to Stalin. Khrushchev by that point was the party secretary of the Industrial Academy. Khrushchev later would say that this was his lucky lottery ticket, a dream come true.
This lottery galvanizes his career. By 1933, he is already Moscow party secretary.
He believed that, Stalin couldn't be wrong. And Khrushchev, as a chief of Moscow Communist, sit next to Stalin. You could see the adoration in his face. I mean, he just adores that great leader. And he finally got a chance to sit next to that great man.
He also played a role which helped him to rise. And the role was of a kind of court jester in Stalin's court. Khrushchev was a simple man in the sense of he was uneducated, and he played that up. And I think that had the effect of lulling Stalin's suspicions and vigilance. In Stalin's court, everybody was suspicious of everybody else. But Khrushchev seemed to be safe. He was a safe choice. And I think one of the things that allowed Khrushchev to play the fool so effectively was that in some ways he wasn't. And we learned later in life when he becomes the Soviet leader, that he does some foolish things.
While Khrushchev is in charge, the Moscow metro is constructed. Magnificent buildings are built. The metropolis gains a new face, all in honor of the dictator. But Nikita Khrushchev pays a high price for this proximity to Stalin.
The Great Purchase started when my father was the party secretary of Moscow Committee under 1934. Of course, if you're part of the leadership, you have to be involved.
Spinning away. Let's transfer some excess limitations on that. Let's transfer some spinning away.
In those days, millions of people had been arrested and thrown into Stalin's prisons. But we had so much respect for him that we simply didn't dare do anything about it. At the same time, we'd started to have doubts. Is it all true? Were there valid reasons for all the arrests and death sentences? Was everything above board? But we were afraid to confront the truth. Afraid to raise that curtain and look the truth in the eye.
Inspecting floor plan.
At the end of his life, Khrushchev said he had blood up to his elbows. He had signed death warrants for many people. By the time the purges began, it was too late to try to back out, or he would have been eliminated.
Millions of people are arrested, exiled to Siberia, murdered. In 1938, Nikita Khrushchev becomes party secretary in the Ukraine, at the height of Stalin's purges.
He told it was like after Mongolian invasion. Everything was empty. All these party committees were empty, everybody was arrested.
Stalin's henchmen don't even spare Khrushchev's closest associates.
Suddenly his assistants were being arrested. And he says, well, I thought that they were upstanding communists, and now I'm told that they were not. And especially under the Stalin regime, you find explanations that say, well, maybe I'm wrong, because how the great leader could be.
Engines primed. Checking currents.
We will puncture through. Take me to front lines.
Continued to be loyal to Stalin and impressed by Stalin, and glad to be in Stalin's inner circle.
After the Hitler-Stalin Pact of 1939, Khrushchev is put in charge of annexing eastern Poland. Over 100,000 people are arrested, tens of thousands murdered.
Khrushchev never publicly regretted, and I don't think even privately regretted, his role in the conquering of Western Ukraine. Of all the things that can be said of Khrushchev, this is one of the most damning, because blood was shed and he himself cheered on the brutality.
Checking currents.
June 1941. Nazi Germany attacks the Soviet Union. Nikita Khrushchev serves at the front in the Great Patriotic War, as it is now known.
He was a political commissar by the side of the commanding generals. First in Kiev, then at Stalingrad, later in Kursk. He was central to the conduct of the war, which of course Stalin was directing from Moscow. At one point, Stalin concluded that Khrushchev himself was guilty, along with the generals he fought with, of cowardice and of retreat. And at that point, Stalin called him to Moscow And Khrushchev says in his memoirs, and I believe him, that Khrushchev felt that his fate was, his life was hanging by a thread. But in this situation, Stalin forgave him. Again, the fact that he was Stalin's favorite, Stalin's pet, prevailed, and Khrushchev survived.
На улицах освобожденного города киевляне встречали маршал Никиту Сергеевича Хрущева.
Khrushchev is in the Ukraine at the end of the war. He permits the people to acclaim him for liberating the province from the Germans. At the end of the 1940s, Joseph Stalin orders Khrushchev back to Moscow. The dictator is at the height of his power.
Battle fortress on the alert! Rolling thunder!
It was very dangerous to discuss Stalin in any Soviet family. It was 100 times more dangerous and discuss it in our level. Even my father told me, here you see, this is the Kremlin telephone. If they will ring and you will pick up the phone and they told you it is from the Stalin secretary, say nothing. Any words, asking. Only answer, I will find my father. He was afraid.
Now Khrushchev is among those competing for power.
These were some of the most horrendous years of what we sometimes refer to as high Stalinism. These were the years when the old man, Stalin, was growing older and even more suspicious, even more paranoid, if that's possible, than he had been before.
Stalin was a very lone person, and he had some group of the close associated lieutenants, 5-6 people, whom he invited mostly every night.
Invite is probably the wrong word. He would drag them to his dacha outside Moscow and stuff them with food and force drink upon them. And these sessions would go on into the early morning hours, by which time they were drunk and fatigued, and finally he would let them go.
It is 5-6 lonely men sitting each night at the same table, telling the same things, trying to make joke on each other. And sometimes Stalin told, let's dance, and they dance, man with the man.
One of the reasons he did this was for company, but another reason was his hope that the drink would loosen their tongues, just in case they had any conspiracies in mind.
You have to be on the very alert. Be really prepared for everything. You never know from where you go here home and they send you directly to the jail.
Loading up the belt. Let's take the guns for a spin.
Stalin's death is a liberation for his subjects. The dictator himself never arranged a successor. His fear of a possible rival was too great. And now, Khrushchev's time has come.
When Stalin died, he said about Lavrentiy Beria, the chief of NKVD, we have to do something, they will kill us. He will kill us all.
Lavrentiy Beria, the most powerful man after Stalin.
The way of ruling of Beria was through the Gulag and the police and the arrests and others. He personally did it. So my father tried to start the plot against him.
Khrushchev does deals and wins allies. He has a plan. Now his ability to get on with everyone pays dividends.
And in this plot, this conspiracy against Beria, Khrushchev was the one who had the guts and the courage to organize the conspiracy, which eventuated in the arrest of Beria.
Beria is executed, while other rivals are neutralized.
Each successful leader becoming successful leader because he have intuition. And he must be decisive, not be afraid to take responsibility and to act in the correct time. And this is difference between loser and winner.
The winner, the new master of the Kremlin, is Nikita Khrushchev. In 1956, Khrushchev holds the first party conference since Stalin's death.
No, I knew nothing about secret speech, so-called secret speech, because my father didn't share this information with the family.
In a closed meeting, when there are no foreign guests and no records are kept, Khrushchev denounces Stalin's crimes.
Turn up the speed. Where is battle? Yuri's tank division.
For the first time in Soviet Russian history, somebody came out, the leader came out and said, we made mistakes. We apologize to the nation.
Khrushchev had the courage to denounce the man who had committed such horrors, a Holocaust in the Soviet Union. He had the moral decency remained to break with that man, to denounce him, and to try to de-Stalinize the Soviet Union.
The speech is a sensation. Now Stalin, the father of Russia, is condemned as a criminal.
Learning has taught us well.
And my father told Sonny, you have to confess, because I believe that we're building the best society in the world, as he told. You cannot live in the paradise surrounded by the barbed wire. We have to expose Stalin's crimes and our crimes. He never separated himself from this group. And then, like it was in the church, if they forgive us, we'll go forward.
A fresh wind sweeps through the Soviet Union. The focus of power is a cheerful head of state and party secretary with a plan for the future. He wants humanitarian socialism, believing in the superiority of the system.
I love the smell of good. Yuri's tank division. I want always Mr. Yuri. Yuri's tank division. Take me to front line.
Khrushchev hat ganz wichtige Reformen angestoßen.
Khrushchev initiated very important reforms, without which the Soviet Union would probably have collapsed far sooner. The most important thing he did was to liberate the peasants. You have to remember that the whole of the Soviet industrial apparatus was constructed on the bones of peasants who were deprived of their rights. They were squeezed dry in order to raise the necessary funds for investment in heavy industry. This brutal exploitation of the workers was brought to an end. Now for the first time, they were able to taste the fruits of socialism. Families were given their own apartments. Before this, that would have been unthinkable.
A fresh wind blows through the Soviet Union. At last, after the terror of Stalin's rule.
Turn up the speed.
1957, the Festival of International Youth. I mean, can you imagine all these foreign people came into Moscow and mingled with the Soviet people? I mean, that was never happened. That was an incredibly liberal moment. All the great theater of Russia came out during the thaw because suddenly there was this variety of ideas that you could exercise. The film had a remarkable renaissance at the time because suddenly people could speak. There was incredible attempts to decentralize the communist monolith in every area.
And Khrushchev doesn't only open up the country in terms of domestic policy, he introduces a new concept in dealings with the West: peaceful coexistence.
Turn up the speed.
His sincere policy was, we have to live in peace with West. But he believed that if we will reform our society, we will be ahead of all other countries and they will join us.
Khrushchev wants an easing of tensions, but he doesn't question the system itself. That's why he has the Hungarian uprising suppressed in 1956, not long after his secret speech. He advocates socialism around the world, tirelessly visiting every continent until the end of his period in office.
Flasher tank ready. Yes, Mr. Yuri. We will function through. Yes, Mr. Yuri.
Khrushchev's avowed goal is equality with the West, also in military terms. He believes that a balance of arms maintains the peace.
Flasher tank ready. The hunt is on.
In the space race, the Soviet Union scores an immense propaganda success under Khrushchev with the first manned orbit of the planet. Yuri Gagarin becomes a hero of the nation. Khrushchev relishes the acclaim.
He's the one who brings the Soviet Union up to standard in the second half of the 20th century. Although the country seemed to be at the peak of its military might when he came to power, it was really not equipped for a conflict with the USA. Only during Khrushchev's rule did the Soviet Union really become a global player in the Cold War.
In 1958, Nikita Khrushchev issues an ultimatum that causes a political sensation. He demands the withdrawal of Western troops from West Berlin so it can become a free city, independent of West Germany.
The crucial aim here is to stabilize East Germany. The country has become a constant financial burden for the Soviet Union because it requires huge financial support. The East German head of state, Ulbricht, is very cunning in his dealings with Khrushchev. You have to give us everything we want, because we are the public face of socialism. The whole world is watching us. This way, you can show how successful the system is. And Khrushchev has simply become tired of constantly having to give in to this little party secretary from Saxony. He wants a permanent, stable solution for East Germany.
Lösung für die DDR.